So I'm Peter Bamforth, I'm Head of Creative Strategy here at Digital Voices. So if you've worked with us before, you've either come across myself or one of the team, because we help build out the proposals and the best ways to work with creators. Like Kerry said, we're going to be talking more about creator communities and building community on YouTube and the opportunities on the platform, which I think we've touched on a little bit across the previous couple of panels, especially Jack on the first panel talking a lot about building community. And I think when it comes to a platform like YouTube, the big difference is that opportunity on long form, short form content, like Jack mentioned, it's almost like sometimes feels like a poster, a billboard that you might come across, you think it looks pretty, but then you might move on. Whereas, we have these really long form, deep discussions with someone like Jordan, who we'll introduce in a second. You're producing content that's like 20, 30, 40-minute deep dives, video essays into content like, is beauty culture making people feel lonelier, or jumping into the celebrity lookalike competitions and a half an hour deep dive into that specific thing, which is interesting. We might touch on it later because that's taking community from online into real life, as people may have seen with Timothy Chalamet lookalike competitions and things like that. So I think that's a good opportunity to introduce, firstly Jordan, then we'll go on to Bobby, if you'd like to introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi, my name's Jordan Teresa. I'm a video essayist over on YouTube. I talk mostly about pop culture, how it intersects with feminism. So I've spoken more recently about pick-me politics, and things can get really niche. I made a video about why all men have navy bed sheets, but intersected it with how with who's feeling attacked in this room. I intersected it with the household labor gap between men and women, and the fact that men are less likely to invest time in buying some nice bed sheets. So that's what I do over there, and I love it.
Amazing. Hi, I'm Bobby. I'm a creative lead in Google, and hopefully I work with brands and agencies to hopefully help them unlock the power of YouTube.
Cool, thank you very much. So I think we'll have some very interesting conversations. I am guilty of having bed sheets and only change them because I got a girlfriend. So why don't we start looking at how community is built on YouTube, different from other platforms. Maybe it's quite nice to understand a bit more about your audience and, Jordan, how you define your community, why are they watching you, and who are they?
So my community, when I think of my community, I immediately think of young women. I think 80% of my audience are women aged between 16 and 35. They are inquisitive, they're curious, they're incredibly engaged. Like Jack said earlier, I think a big thing that defines community is rather than people talking to you, people more talk to each other and have these really in-depth conversations and debates in my comments. And from a brand perspective as well, I was doing my research the other day, and women are the largest consumers. I think it's predicted by the end of the decade that women are going to drive 75% of discretionary spending, which is insane to think about. So there's a lot of power in communities with, vast majority women.
And with your community, how do you make them feel seen? How do you make them feel heard? Because I feel like you talk about a lot of very, very deep topics and interesting topics. How do you make sure that what comments they're leaving, that actually comes through into feeling like a really engaged community?
I often talk, a lot of the things that I cover, 80% of the time are requested. I cover topics that people be like, oh my God, yes, I've been waiting for you to talk about this. So that's mostly, I feel how people feel really seen. But also something which is really important is that I engage and I listen to constructive criticism. Obviously, being online, you're going to get criticized literally all the time. I'm not going to get a set of braces just because people are telling me my teeth are wonky. But if I misstep in a video, or if there's a perspective that I haven't thought about or considered, I will take it on board. And it's an inevitability when you're online that you're going to make missteps, you're going to make mistakes. The most important thing is to own up, put your hands up, apologize, and move on. And people will really, really respect you if you do that and feel very listened to and heard.
I think talking about taking ownership, and do you feel sometimes you're building that parasocial relationship where they feel more like a community or friends that you can't let down? And I think one of the questions that I was going to ask is the difference between creators who are more personality-led versus content-driven. So a content-driven creator like maybe Mr. Beast is all about the spectacle, whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you've got creators maybe more like yourself that people are tuning in because they want to hear your perspective and your point of view. How do you think those two types of creators might differ and how a brand might work with them differently?
It's a really tricky question, actually.
So I'm going to go on a tangent.
I think that I think when it comes to personality-driven creators like myself, the sort of brand partnership doesn't have to be so interwoven with the content because, people are listening to me. It sounds really up myself, but like people are listening for my opinion. Therefore, if I'm recommending a service or a product, they're going to be like, oh, I, value her opinion, therefore I'm going to value this recommendation. Meanwhile, I feel like, again, content which is all spectacle, I feel like you really have to interweave the brand partnership into the content itself. And I feel very lucky that with my integrations, of course, I make an effort to try and, interwove it into the video somehow. But, once I got sponsored by this app called Love and Pies, which I'm obsessed with, Love and Pies, and I was making a video about sororities, and I was like, I don't really think that I could intersect this in, but, I still did the integration, and it did really well. I got to work with them again, even though there wasn't that direct link.
Cool. That's good. Interesting to know. And I think that leads on nicely to Bobby talking about maybe in the past 5 years, have you seen a shift on YouTube in how creators are building their communities?
Yeah. I think, of course, Nish really talked about like multi-platform and all the new devices and services that are appearing on YouTube. And I think tweaking your kind of content to those services and devices, I think has been one of the biggest changes. So like shorts and making short form content and how that might lead to longer form, your longer form video. Obviously creating for connected TV. I think the fact that you're making really long form video and the stat we heard earlier around this 72 minutes being spent kind of a day, that long form content really lends itself to that kind of that data point, right?
Is there a difference, or do you see in the data a big difference between YouTube Shorts and creators who are maybe primarily YouTube Shorts and building a community there versus creators building more of a long form community?
I think it depends on how long you've been on the platform. And so we heard earlier from Jack and even from Carwell, they're born from making kind of long form kind of content, right? And they've been established for making long form content. And we're seeing shorts being a way to like start on YouTube, right? And actually just get started and start making. It's the easiest format to kind of make for. And equally from other channels as well. So you kind of like kind of become famous on TikTok and then maybe move across to YouTube then to kind of dedicate yourself to your craft and making longer form kind of content. And then we see kind of creators using both, right? Using both long form and short form to in a bit of a flywheel to drive kind of views across the content and actually just build the audience.
Are you seeing it all with the kind of omnipresence of TikTok maybe disappearing in the US? Maybe it is, and creators bringing their communities across from those other platforms onto YouTube, and maybe brands wanting to get ahead of the game and start building those relationships there when they might have previously been like TikTok or Instagram.
Yeah, it was a significant shift, isn't it? That kind of moment, and I think creators realise that generally you shouldn't wed yourself to any single platform, right? And we actually do see creators are, they're not similar to kind of like one platform. They are across multiple channels, but there was certainly a shift in terms of moving towards kind of YouTube and YouTube Shorts as a channel, understanding that actually the format is actually something I'm familiar with and I can create for it, and my audience hopefully will follow along with me.
Nice. And I think that's staying on the short form versus long form debate. You do both. How do you decide when working with a brand whether you think they're better suited to a long form video or a short form video? Is there any difference in how you approach that?
I definitely think there is a difference. I think this is a really interesting question because I think the perks of YouTube sponsorships is that the content, at least in my cases, the content would exist without the ad. The content would be able to stand on its own without the ad, and people are clicking for the content, they're not clicking for the ad. Meanwhilst on short form, a vast majority of the time, people are intersecting, the ads almost stand alone, right? And something that as brands or agencies you may notice is that a lot of creators, and myself included sometimes, your ads on short form will actually perform not as well as the rest of your content because your audience just don't respond super well to an ad, but like a sole existing short form ad. But something that a change that I've made recently on short form is with my short form content, I make sure that I'm working with brands that all brands are aligned to me anyway. I like all brands that I work with anyway, but ones that particularly I know could stand alone with a short form video. So for example, I worked with Loop earplugs over on my Instagram really recently. It did really, really well. And as Jack mentioned earlier, it was because everyone was really happy for me. Like, I go out a lot, I'm a party girl, and I need my earplugs, and it really, really fit well with like my personality. But meanwhile, with like, again, everything comes back to Love and Pies. But I've worked with Love and Pies on YouTube, and I literally am on level like 92 of that app. But they asked me to do a reel, and I was like, I just don't think I can like fit it in and like make it seem, but like I'm more than happy to work with them on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about how you decide which brands you decide to work with. I think in your case, it's quite interesting because you also talk a lot about consumerism in your videos. How do you balance a community that's aware of your views on that with working with brands and is ultimately trying to promote brands to sell product?
It's, again, a very interesting question. I just make sure that I work with brands that are aligned with my ethics and like morals. So, for example, my audience, they know how life works. They know that I have to make money. They understand that, and they're like very respectful, and they understand that I have to do sponsorships at the end of the day. So I make sure that it's services that I actually love. Skillshare, I really adore working with Skillshare. Love and Pies, of course. But there's like essentially lots of things that I like enjoy working with, and I just draw the line at like some. So for example, I don't work with any fast fashion brands because I don't agree with the fast fashion industry as a whole. And if I did work with a fast fashion brand, my audience would kick off. So yeah, it's basically about finding the balance and working with brands that not only align with you but align with your audience's values as well.
Have you ever been surprised, and this is something we've touched on maybe with Surfshark and drag queens and other examples, of a brand that's come to you that you weren't necessarily expecting to want to work with, but have ended up working with them, it went really well?
It's going to go back to Love and Pies again now, guys. When I got like given Love and Pies, I was a bit like, I mean, all right, sure. And then like they like play to level 3. I was like, yeah, all right, I'll pay to level 3. And then I was thinking, la 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 la, level 92 later. Like I genuinely just thought it was going to be like a run-of-the-mill app, and I'm so obsessed with it. Sorry, it's so embarrassing.
You should have got Love and Pies in the room.
Like if anyone knows anyone at Love and Pies, tell them I love them. But I really, really wasn't expecting it, and because I couldn't quite interlink the sponsor with the content, I basically said, I was like, guys, at this point I was on like level 38. I was like, guys, I'm on level 38. You can tell I really like this. And the audience responded really, really well. And like, even now, like the Love and Pies lore lives on. And like my audience, they like, a lot of them know that I love that game. So that's something that I really, really didn't expect. And like, I absolutely love working with like apps and stuff now.
This is maybe skipping ahead, is a question I was going to ask in the next section, but because you talked about the Love and Pies lore, going on to Bobby, how do you think brands can not only use YouTube for like driving sales, as we've spoken about already, but that longer term brand building? I've seen loads of creators who work with a brand over a long term, and their comments are just full of like, they're excited when they work with that specific brand. They've got Love and Pies lore. With Surfshark, we worked with a creator called Tom Scar, and I went on his subreddit the other day, and there was literally someone doing a poll to support them with their university research, and they were doing a whole university research topic around brand sponsorships and using Tom Scar and Surfshark as their research. And it was just really interesting how deep some of the partnerships and connections with brands and creators go.
Yeah, I think, as we've heard today, creators have spent a lot of time invested in their platform, building their audience, right? And the audience is also really invested in the success of creators now, right? And the creators that you follow and they spend time with. And like you said, Jordan, like your audience trust, you know what I mean? You put POV on a product or a service, right? And so I guess those long established kind of brand relationships only reinforce that kind of that trust and that relationship that a creator has with their audience, and therefore, the recommendation of particular products, right? And so, rather than being, I don't want to use the word flash in the pan, but we heard kind of earlier in terms of like a one and done kind of partnership with a creator, where it's kind of like, it's clearly obvious that you're just working with this brand for this one occasion, and then we're going to move on to the next creator. But once you see that, okay, then there's a relationship, there's an existing relationship here where creators spent, has been working with a brand for a long period of time. There's a lot more trust in the message and the service or product they're talking about.
And are there any formats on YouTube, we've mentioned that TV viewership is always on the rise, that you think a brand could tap into if they're wanting to work with YouTube creators to really build that long-term storytelling, brand building, deep creator brand partnership?
Formats as in content formats?
As in, yeah, any content formats in terms of maybe I know podcasting's huge at the moment on YouTube.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I guess podcast is the kind of like the buzzword right now, and the kind of like the most salient sort of kind of format on the platform. But yeah, we've had a long established kind of like series of kind of formats, right, that work really well on the platform. And again, they're not kind of viral kind of formats. These are formats that are long established, and people know what they know what they come to the platform for in terms of when they're going to engage with content. And these formats are really great tools at kind of like delivering a particular message, right? And of course, different creators lean into different formats depending on the actual content they have, or the content they kind of produce, right? So whether it's an essay series, right, or if a creator is born of podcasting, right, certainly leaning into those formats that the audience is familiar with is a great way of reaching and communication, delivering your kind of message to an audience. But whether it's podcasting or whether it's like behind the scenes or challenges, listicles, these are all kind of formats that are long established, get ready with me's on the platform that the audience is familiar with, and it's a rich toolbox kind of for brands to play with to deliver the message.
And how much creative control would you recommend a brand gives to the creator to have that balance of, for example, at Digital Voices we always have onboarding calls with creators to make sure that what the brand needs to get across gets across, but also working with the creator to make sure that it feels really authentic and native within their content. And sometimes that can be the biggest hurdle or the biggest piece of education needed for a brand. So in terms of that creative control element with ads and brand partnerships or with YouTube creators, what would you advise a brand to do?
I mean, it's a bit of a sliding scale, right? And so when you are working with creators, you're either giving them full reign to, quite bravely to talk about your products in a way that feels kind of like authentic to their audience, right? All the way through to like high quality production kind of sets, right? Where you're kind of like using the creator as, for their fame, right, in their face, but also the kind of like what they bring to the actual kind of to the ad. But I think of like a Venn diagram when it comes to what each kind of party kind of wants to get out of the kind of like the collaboration. So you have your the audience, right? Let's start with the audience who are on the channel for the reason they're following the creator for a particular reason because they admire or they're really invested in that creator. You have the creator who's popular, and the reason you want to work with them is because of how they deliver their information and how they authentically talk around their content. And then of course you have the brand, right? So you can't escape the fact that the brand really has a message they want to deliver. They have a product and they need to talk about the product in a certain way. And so again, we talk about this kind of Venn diagram and that piece in the middle when all these kind of parts come together. So trusting that the creator is going to be able to deliver your brand message in a way that feels authentic to themselves and to the audience, but also giving them the kind of guardrails in terms of, okay, here are the kind of beats that we want you to kind of capture. Here's what's important about the product that we'd like you to kind of talk about, and then it's up to the creator to then decide how it is they bring that to life in a way that feels kind of like true to them.
And I guess off the back of that, Jordan, do you see when you're briefed by agencies or brands to produce content, do you ever produce the content and it's either very prescriptive and or you're given full creative control and then feedback from your community? Does that ever differ based on how the brand's briefed you in?
Honestly, I find that the brands that I work with, I've never really felt like restricted or anything. I feel like I've always been given a lot of creative freedom, and I agree with that. Of course, I totally understand hitting all the briefing points, and I understand that creators can be a little bit difficult to work with sometimes. But also, I think something really important is that nobody knows their audience better than the creator that you're working with, and if they're giving you a genuine piece of advice, like, look, I think this is going to come across better, or I think I should say it like this. And when I've been given a bit of a strict brief, I'll always ask to mix it around. I've never been told no. So, I think there's definitely no harm in asking. But also as brands, like definitely listening to creators. I think I had one, I'm trying to remember what brand it was, but I shot like an Instagram campaign for them. It looked so good. And they were like, we don't like it. You have to change it. And I basically had to do sort of like generic posing with product one, and it didn't even perform that well. And I knew that was going to happen. But yeah.
and this might be, the answer might be love and pies, but have you worked or do you see a big difference between working long term with a brand where the product's showing up constantly, you're talking about it all the time, maybe Skillshare, I know you do a few videos with, and interestingly, actually, that might be a point on Skillshare, you have your own course on Skillshare, so that's extremely relevant to not only you and your audience, but there's a reason you're showing your love for the brand. So going back to working long term, and maybe the opportunities with those deeper partnerships where Skillshare brings you on board to actually produce content on their platform, not just promote their platform, what impact that has.
I definitely find that long retention with brands makes such a big difference. Skillshare being the perfect example. I worked with them for I think nearly a year, and I think the best thing before I did my own class with them, and I think the best thing about Skillshare is they really do let you choose any class to promote, and with my video essays, because they can, sometimes I would link it to just the wider topic of writing video essays, and I took an essay writing class on Skillshare, which helped improve my video essay writing skills. But also when I made the video about why all men have navy bed sheets, I linked a Skillshare class about taking care of plants and your living space, and being man, if you're feeling a bit attacked, take this class, and then when I ended up making my own class, everyone was really happy for me, and so many people signed up, and it made me so happy. And I also worked with a sex toy brand called Balesa for a while. I used to run regular giveaways with them. Unfortunately, I can't work with sex toy brands on YouTube anymore because they start getting too monetized, which is so sad. But I definitely noticed when I would do a giveaway with them, the girlies were celebrating. It was hallelujah. But yeah.
Cool. How much time do we have left, Neve? Cool. Perfect. I think it'd be good to just chat about maybe some looking ahead, and this is going back to Bobby at YouTube. Are there any tools coming out maybe on YouTube specifically that can really help creators build their communities and byproduct help brands tap into those communities?
Sure. I think so we kind of touched on existing tools already, talked about community posts, but also kind of polls and live streaming as well, which is something you don't really typically associate with kind of YouTube and YouTube Shorts typically. But yeah, using live. And then premieres as well, setting a schedule for your content and creating a moment to kind of for your audience to kind of tune in for, right? So scheduling as well your content, so it's a moment where people can come sit down and watch your content. I think the newest kind of bit of innovation on the platform is going to be AI, and the AI kind of tools are available to help in terms of deciding what content to make and what new content I want to kind of talk about, and again, whether it's using what's trending on the platform, what people are talking about, and using that to craft not necessarily scripts, but helping you understand how you might want to create a new bit of content, right? So what's kind of trending, or what the kind of new kind of factual things that are happening, topical things that are happening, and then leaning into using AI to identify those kind of moments. I think that's the kind of newest kind of tools, and of course shorts. I've said shorts way too many times already today, but utilizing shorts and those different length formats.
Do you think, and I know this isn't necessarily YouTube promoting this, but with AI, there's obviously a huge influx of content that's purely AI produced and just flooding short form mainly with AI generated content. Do you think that leaves a space, because there's a bit of a buzzword at the moment around memorable views, and how YouTube really offers that, because you've got the long form, you've got people developing these really great pieces of content. There's a space for brands to really still work with those individual creators that are producing really long form, well thought out content, versus just creators who produce 20 shorts a day because they're leaning so much into AI generation.
Yeah, I would say, creators and the content they make is at the heart of everything that kind of YouTube cares about, right? And so they're always going to favor those kind of not just long form, but of course we talk about diversity of kind of video lengths, right? But those kind of those creators and the communities they've established, right? And we know, again, because of connectivity and the platform, and it's a sit-down moment, and so long form is always going to be kind of like at the heart of kind of YouTube. Of course, we understand AI is a creative tool, and Gen AI is a creative tool to help. I think we want to see it as a way to enhance what creators do and evolve what kind of creators do. So we have a tool called Dream Screen that allows you to, again, add kind of special effects and generative kind of like video and imagery to your kind of video, again, just to help you be a better creator, right? So it's all about production and help you be a better creator and helping you to create a better story, right? So I think it's more of a tool rather than a replacement for kind of like the content that we see on the platform.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to put it, that especially the tools you're working on at YouTube is all just to help these creatives produce better content rather than just trying to get more content out there. I think before going on to questions, if anyone, not if anyone has any questions yet, we'll go on to that in a second. But just closing out, is there one thing, and I'll go to Jordan first, that you want a brand to take away in terms of what you see as the best way to actually engage a creator's audience?
Listen to the creator, like just present a flexible brief. Briefs can be long and like filled up with everything you want me to cover. Like I can handle it, but just give a lot of creative freedom, because as I said earlier, nobody knows their audience better than the creator. And if that is something that the creator is like pushing back on, a change that you would like them to make, be like, look, just listen to them. Not if you want the change made, of course, but that's sort of my biggest piece of advice. And also, not every long form sponsorship needs to be perfectly interwoven and related to the video. Ads can still be extremely effective if they are integrated very simply. This video is brought to you by, this video is sponsored by. Those ads which are on my channel still perform really, really well. And sometimes I felt audiences respond a little better when they know that they're being sold something, because it's all very transparent. That's my biggest takeaways, really.
Well, thank you very much. And Bobby?
Yeah, I think I agree. As a creative, we like the freedom of a tight brief, right? And so not everyone wants or can start from a blank canvas, and not all creators are created equally. Creators are at different levels, and some are very kind of like are well-versed and experienced and know what to produce, but some aren't quite there yet, right? And so the freedom of a tight brief, giving them the kind of the guidelines to produce an effective kind of ad or a campaign, I think is going to be super helpful. And yeah, it's one of the benefits of working with an influencer agency like Digital Voices, in terms of supporting that creator to produce that bit of content that a client or an advertiser is going to be happy with.
Well, thank you very much, both. Does anyone have any questions for anyone on the panel? Yes?
On the subject of briefs, so trying to find that sweet spot between obviously touching on our guardrails, because we're from flow, so there's a ton because it comes to female health, and obviously the talking points that we want creators to touch on, but then also because it is female health, having like a relatable, genuine experience. Like, what are things that you've seen from brands or like best practices that you feel like that's amazing and that's really encouraged you to create either better content or that your like audience aligns better with that content? It's so hard to find.
I would say just keep the brief really clear. And I think something that I really love when a brand does is when they do optional talking points and talking points that you have to touch on. So instead of putting all of the talking points in one big thing, like I want you to cover all of this, be like, oh, I would like it if you definitely covered all of these. Obviously, if your being as your company is related to female health, it's really important to get the points correct. But you have to cover this. And then I'm going to give you 5 points. If you could touch on 2, maybe 3, I get integrations like that, and they'll be like, oh, can you choose one of these talking points, please? And I end up choosing 2 or 3 because I can interwove them really simply together. Yeah.
And I think just adding to that for any brands, like you just said, having those key points that you have to touch on, because there's nothing worse. We work with a lot of financial brands. When we send out the brief, the content comes back, and they're like, oh, we need all of this disclaimer on screen. It's like, well, we could have figured something out if we knew that at the start of the journey. So just being completely open with what is needed and what is flexible. Any other questions? Cool. In that case, I think we're going to networking. I'll hand back to Kerry, but thank you very much to Jordan and Bobby for joining us on this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.